However, what can make the difference is that somebody's lifestyle, their cultural background, their personal preferences with food, how sustainable is the nutrition plan. So let's talk about some of the differences here. Fats have definitely an impact on satiety. It slows gastric emptying. It has a savory and satisfying quality to it. It can keep dopamine high because if you are managing how much your insulin increases, you are not going to be raising serotonin as much. You're not going to be shutting down cortisol, and people need that. And sometimes they feel better in those types of states, right? Now, on the flip side, carbohydrates can have a strong impact on leptin signaling. And leptin signaling is basically one of those hormones that it tells you that you're full so that you don't continue to eat. It signals to your hypothalamus that your metabolism can continue to function well, so you can upregulate your metabolism by having carbohydrates. But also, when you have carbohydrates, it raises serotonin because insulin, when it goes up, it clears a bunch of amino acids in your bloodstream, leaving tryptophan as the dominant amino acid, which then readily gets converted into serotonin. Now, if you happen to be the type of person that benefits a lot from having higher serotonin levels, and everybody has a little different type of neurotransmitter soup in their brain, if you're the type of person that really does well on a serotonin dominant plan, then you will be very happy having a high carb diet. So both types of diets work, but you have to decide what is going to work better for you. And some things work differently for some than others. So if you have this quote unquote deranged metabolism, then I would say that a low carb diet for a period of time may really work well. So a low carb diet works. It helps to train your cells to switch to a different type of fuel for energy. So if you provide only fats, you start to upregulate those enzymes that burn fat, and you'll downregulate those enzymes that basically pull carbohydrates into the cell for fuel. And also, if you happen to be the type of person that does particularly well on a low carb plan with higher fats, then that will potentially be better for you. So I personally like to heal someone's broken or deranged metabolism with low carb diets, but as soon as I possibly can, I go back to training them to start utilizing carbohydrates in order to restore their normal function and to enhance performance and to enhance the autonomic nervous system balance. So here's the caveat, right? Because if you stay too low carb for too long and you're really working out in a specific type of way, a lot of metabolic stuff, a lot of volume, things like that, you can actually have exaggerated inflammation responses. You'll start to utilize carbohydrates and glucose poorly, and you actually will have poor insulin sensitivity, which is the ironic thing because basically you started this whole low carb thing because you were trying to increase insulin sensitivity. Well, if you're part of the category of people that have a deranged metabolism from the beginning, right? And then you start to enhance your insulin sensitivity through providing plenty of fats in your diet and no carbs, you'll start to improve that system. But once that system improves enough, what ends up happening is if you're not utilizing that pathway to take carbohydrates and glucose and turn it into usable energy, the enzymes within the cell starts to downregulate. So then you start to again become more insulin resistant in your muscles because now you're just burning fat and you're having to provide all the fat. And what you would think of is, well, isn't fat burning good? Well, it is good, but there's a difference between being able to release fat from your fat cells, take them into other cells to be burned and then turned into energy. And there's a difference between just consuming lots of fats and then burning those things off as energy just to sustain yourself. So you may actually not be losing fat even though your cells are burning fat. So there's a very important distinction to be made there. So this can be a very sustainable program for a lot of people. A lot of people can be very healthy eating a relatively low carb diet plan. It's sustainable, they're satiated, they find the fats are filling and they're satisfied with all of the nutrition choices that they're making, and it's very easy because they don't really have to track much. A lot of the food choices are not very hyper palatable, and so it becomes very easy. But if you really want, number one, if you want to be a very high performing athlete, or if you really want to start picking up your training a lot, you probably are going to be missing a lot of things, and potentially you may not be able to do it as good as you want to do with a very low carb diet. So to wrap this up, depending how lean you want to get, obviously this still requires a caloric deficit. Sometimes we need to go extreme with a caloric deficit. It depends how lean you actually want to get and how well your metabolism is functioning. But in these states, you become very frugal about which nutrients that you choose to put into your diet because you want to maintain performance as well as possible. So you got to eliminate what's not necessary while you maintain the macronutrients that are going to provide you with the most bang for your buck. And number one of those things is going to be protein, because that's what's going to help you to recover from your training, and it's also going to keep your metabolic rate high. And you want to keep the carbohydrates because that's what's going to be fueling your training, your glycogen replenishment after training, right? And then fats, they're very important, but you just need to have the minimum necessary for you to continue to feel well. So fats are going to manage things like your inflammatory signaling, right? Your hormone balance and your cholesterol balance. They're going to help you to absorb fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and vitamin K. Your cellular membrane health is going to be dependent on the quality of the fats that you take in. So as you start to become more of a bodybuilder and you start to want to get into more single-digit body fat, now this is not an end-all be-all for everyone, but the thing is you might start to shift into more of a higher carbohydrate, high protein, lower fat diet, keeping in mind all of these principles of optimal and holistic health. If you have less of them, less fats, you pay extra attention to the quality of those fats, and you make sure that you're supplementing and being very judicious about which fats you put into your diet, which fats you don't include, but you make sure that you're creating a deficit by pulling back on the fats, keeping the carbs at a high enough level to where your performance is not hindered, and you keep your protein high to keep your metabolic rate high, and also to maintain as much lean mass as possible. So this is not all of the whole story, but I wanted you just to see that there's a spectrum. Everybody's going to need slightly different approach depending on where they're coming from in their journey. And I am only trying to increase the clarity with respect to different contexts so that people understand that where they are is going to change where they need to go in order for that next step in their journey to be successful. I hope that was helpful.